Ever get that feeling, like when the lights go out again, or the water's off for the third time this month, or your car's about to disappear into a pothole the size of a small planet?
Oh, tell me about it.
It's easy to think, well, this is just how it is, right?
Right.
But what if, and stay with me here, what if all that everyday chaos is just the tip of the iceberg? Like a symptom of something way more messed up beneath the surface.
I like where you're going with this.
Well, today, we're going deep into the belly of the beast.
Oh.
We're talking the City of Tshwane.
Tshwane, got it.
And we're going to dissect exactly how your hard-earned money is being handled, or mishandled, depending on what these official reports tell us.
And believe me, we've got reports coming out our ears. Annual reports, budget frameworks, those lovely mid-year performance reviews. You name it, we've crunched the numbers.
So we're talking 2022 to now, primarily?
Primarily, yeah. And for everyone listening, this isn't just about some dry, dusty accounting exercise. We're on a mission here.
A mission, huh? I like the sound of that.
Our mission, if you will, is to cut through the BS. Expose any potential corruption, follow the money trail if it leads to misuse, shine a light on the sheer inefficiency that's eating away at this city, and ultimately give you a clear picture of whether those big, shiny projects they keep promising are actually delivering.
No sugarcoating, just the facts.
Exactly.
Okay, so before we unleash the hounds on the balance sheets, we've got to set the scene. Tshwane, like a lot of big cities, is under immense pressure.
Understatement of the year.
Think about it. The never-ending demand for better roads, reliable water, a power grid that doesn't go kaput every time someone sneezes. Even Moody's, in their credit profile, highlighted this constant infrastructure struggle.
And that's before we even factor in the daily barrage of complaints your local councilors are dealing with. Water cuts, power outages, the whole shebang.
It's the basics, right? The stuff a city should be nailing, no excuses.
Absolutely. And it's against this backdrop, this pressure cooker of needs, that the municipality keeps trumpeting its commitment to good governance and transparency.
Yeah, the city manager's reports are full of that kind of language.
The big question, then, for every single resident is this. How does all that talk line up with the reality on the ground? The reality we're seeing in these documents.
Okay, so let's talk money. Billions and billions of rands. And when you start digging into how it's being managed, some pretty big red flags pop up right away.
Oh, yeah.
Let's start with the city's financial health, its liquidity. The MFMA, that's the Municipal Finance Management Act's Section 52 Q2 report from last year, it doesn't paint a pretty picture.
Not pretty at all.
The city's liquidity ratio, which basically means its ability to cover its short-term bills, is way, way below what the National Treasury recommends.
Like alarmingly below. They should have 1 to 3 months of cash on hand, and they're nowhere near that.
And the main culprit, drumroll please.
Persistently low revenue collection.
Yeah. They're just not bringing in enough money to keep the lights on, literally. Now, the report does mention some improvement in revenue collection, to be fair.
Gradual improvement, they call it.
But gradual clearly isn't cutting it. They're still stuck in this liquidity crisis. And here's where things get really interesting. And by interesting, I mean potentially criminal.
Hit me with it.
When you're already strapped for cash, you'd think they'd be extra careful about how they spend every single rand. But then we stumble upon this lovely category called irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure.
Ugh, my favorite.
And these aren't just bureaucratic buzzwords, by the way. The SDBYP, the Service Delivery and Budget Implementation Plan, they actually have a whole indicator to track this stuff. Can you break down what those terms actually mean in plain English?
Sure. Irregular expenditure. That's when they spend money in a way that breaks the law.
Straight up illegal.
Straight up. Then you have fruitless and wasteful expenditure. That's basically money down the drain. Spending that could have been avoided if someone had been paying attention.
Oh, and don't forget, unauthorized expenditure, that's when they spend more than they're allowed to. And the 2024 audited financial statements, well, let's just say the numbers in the fruitless and wasteful category are pretty eye-popping. Eye-popping is putting it mildly. We're talking millions upon millions of rands just gone.
Yep.
There's this one case that really jumped out at us. The Varani legal settlement. 44 million, poof, vanished.
What happened there?
Seems like they failed to provide site possession for a housing project. And because of that colossal blunder, they had to pay out a massive settlement. 44 million that could have built homes, fixed roads, actually provided services to the people who need them.
It's infuriating, isn't it? All that money wasted because of a basic failure to manage a project properly. Makes you wonder how many other Varanis are lurking in those reports.
Right. It's like a systemic failure to plan and execute projects effectively.
And when you add that to the whole liquidity mess, it just makes it even worse. It's like they're bleeding money from every orifice.
Speaking of bleeding money, let's talk about the debt impairment provision in the 2024 statements. This is basically the city admitting that a huge chunk of the money owed to them. They're probably never going to see it.
So they're writing it off.
Essentially, yeah. And where are these uncollectible debts coming from? Primarily unpaid rates, electricity bills, and water charges.
Which, surprise, surprise, takes us right back to that revenue collection problem we talked about. It's a vicious cycle. People don't pay, the city loses money, services suffer.
So on one hand, they can't collect what they're owed, and on the other hand, they're throwing money away like it's confetti. It's a recipe for financial disaster.
It really is.
Okay, so they're not great at collecting money, and they're even worse at spending it wisely. But they are trying to spend some of it, right? Like on infrastructure projects.
Well, that's the idea anyway.
Yeah.
But the mid-year budget performance assessment shows that they're not exactly hitting their targets.
They're spending.
Big time. They're supposed to be investing in these crucial infrastructure projects, but the money's just sitting there. And one of the main reasons for this, according to the report, is delays in tender processes.
Tender delays. The bureaucratic black hole where projects go to die. But let's get specific. What does this underspending actually mean for the residents of Tshwane? Let's look at some real-world examples. Roads and transport, for instance.
Oh, boy.
The MFMA Section 52 Q2 report highlights the Soshangu's Block WW Phase 2 upgrading project. What's the status there?
Stalled. Big time.
Stalled? Why?
BEC and BAC delays. That's the Bid Evaluation Committee and the Bid Adjudication Committee. These committees are supposed to make sure everything's above board with procurement, but the process is so slow it's practically fossilized.
So because of these bureaucratic bottlenecks, the peoples of Soshangu are stuck waiting and waiting for essential road upgrades.
Yeah.
It's just not right.
It isn't.
But surely there must be some good news somewhere in these reports.
Well, there is one project that seems to be moving along relatively smoothly. The refurbishment of the Laudium bulk pipeline. The MFMA report actually says they've hit some major milestones. They've done a lot of the excavation work, the pipeline connections are done, and they even did a final inspection back in November 2024.
So it is possible for the municipality to actually deliver a project on time and on budget. Who knew?
It's a Christmas miracle.
Okay, now back to reality. What about the BRT Line 2C?
More delays, I'm afraid.
The mid-year budget performance assessment mentions that, yeah.
Blame it on the rain. Apparently, the rainfall has impacted construction work.
Okay, so bad weather can definitely slow things down, but it does make you wonder about their planning, you know? Did they factor in the rainy season?
Good question. Maybe they need a better umbrella.
Maybe. Okay, let's shift gears to human settlements. The report on service delivery and SDBIP implementation has some pretty concerning stuff in there.
Yeah, this one's a doozy.
The Buisens X4 reservoir project. This is a big one, a 30 million liter reservoir. And they're stuck at the very first step, appointing a consulting engineer.
And the reason, you guessed it, SCM processes, supply chain management.
It's like every project gets bogged down in red tape.
Pretty much. And then there are the KPIs, the key performance indicators for land acquisition for human settlements and the number of subsidized housing units built. The numbers are way, way off target.
So they're not acquiring enough land, which means they can't build enough houses, which means the housing backlog just keeps getting bigger.
Exactly.
And there's this whole thing about inclusionary housing in the Municipal Spatial Development Framework, the MSDF.
Right, that's their long-term plan for the city. Inclusionary housing basically means including affordable housing in new developments. But apparently there wasn't a clear national or provincial policy on this when they wrote the MSDF, so it was hard to come up with a good strategy.
Which just goes to show how important it is for all levels of government to be on the same page.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's dive into water and sanitation infrastructure. The 2023 audited consolidated financial statements, oh boy, non-revenue water losses.
A truly staggering amount of water just disappearing.
Like 111 billion liters.
That's billion with a B.
It's mind-blowing. Leaks, unbilled consumption, who knows what else. It's a colossal waste of a precious resource.
Especially in a country where water scarcity is a real and growing concern.
Absolutely. Okay, what about the Roy Wall wastewater treatment works?
That's been a major headache for the city, especially with the water crisis in Hammondskull. But there's a glimmer of hope. The 100 Days report talks about some ongoing efforts to find a lasting solution for Hammanskral's water problems.
So they are trying to ensure a reliable supply of safe drinking water.
That's the plan anyway.
Ah.
They say they're moving away from quick fixes and towards a more long-term approach. But the proof will be in the pudding, right?
Absolutely. The people of Hammanskraal deserve more than just promises. They need to see real, tangible improvements.
Agreed.
Okay, last one on capital expenditure, public lighting.
Ah, yes. Bringing light to the darkness.
Literally. The MFMA Section 52Q2 report talks about Region 5's public lighting program. They've made some progress in putting in the infrastructure, but they're behind on actually connecting the streetlights.
So the foundation is there, but the lights are still out.
Pretty much.
It's a metaphor for the whole city, isn't it?
Sadly, yes. So we've seen some progress, but also a lot of delays, underspending, and projects stuck in bureaucratic limbo.
The picture's not exactly rosy.
Not at all. Okay, let's broaden the scope and look at the city's overall financial health. Liabilities and assets. The consolidated monthly budget statement for December 2024. It's a bit of a gut punch.
Lay it on me.
Current liabilities outweigh current assets by a whopping $3.7 billion. That's not a gap, that's a chasm. What does that mean for essential services? For fixing potholes, keeping the lights on?
It means tough choices. And it means that those essential services are likely to suffer.
And what's contributing to this massive liability?
A lot of things. For starters, they've got a mountain of borrowings, $8.5 billion. And then there's the service concession liability, another $2.5 billion.
So they're drowning in debt.
Pretty much.
The report also mentions these things called interest rate swaps. Can you explain those?
Sure. They're basically a way to manage the city's debt portfolio. The 2024 unaudited financial statements talk about it.
So they're trying to mitigate the risk that comes with fluctuating interest rates.
Exactly. But it's a risky game.
Risky how?
Well, if those interest rates spike unexpectedly, it could backfire big time.
Okay, what about investments? Surely the city has some investments that can offset these liabilities.
They do, but the returns are pretty modest. The 2024 unaudited financial statements say they're getting around 7 to 8% on their investments.
Which is okay, but
it's a drop in the bucket compared to the scale of their liabilities.
So basically their debts far outweigh their assets and investments? Not a good sign.
Not good at all.
Okay, let's talk about governance and accountability. This is just as important as the numbers themselves, maybe even more so. The 2022-2023 annual report mentions a Section 79 Oversight Committee for Roads and Transport. What's that all about?
Well, this committee is specifically tasked with scrutinizing anything and everything related to roads and transport. They get reports from the council and the executive mayor, and they're supposed to make sure everything's running smoothly. Or as smoothly as possible, given the circumstances.
So they're kind of like a watchdog, making sure the money's being spent properly and projects are on track.
Exactly. And the committee has members from different political parties, which is good. In theory, at least, it should lead to more balanced oversight.
Right. And public participation is another way to keep the municipality accountable. Right.
Absolutely. There are these public meetings where they present the MPAC annual report. That's the Municipal Public Accounts Committee.
And the purpose of these meetings?
To give the public a chance to see how their money's being spent.
Yeah.
And to ask questions. And hopefully to hold the city accountable.
Sounds good in theory. But here's the catch. What if the information they're presenting is unreliable?
Ah, yes. The Auditor General's report. Not a happy read.
Not at all. The Auditor General found some pretty serious problems with the city's performance reporting. Basically, they're not collecting data properly, they're not reporting it accurately, and they don't have enough evidence to back up their claims.
Which means we can't really trust the numbers.
And on top of that, the city's overall performance against its own targets is abysmal, less than 50%.
And their target was 85%. So, yeah, not great.
It's like they're flying blind. If they can't even measure their own performance, how can they possibly improve?
Exactly.
And even submitting reports on time seems to be a struggle. We saw a notification from the city manager saying they missed the deadline for the quarterly report.
That was in January of this year. They blamed it on internal committee delays.
So even basic administrative tasks are a problem.
It seems so.
And then there's the 2023-24 Consolidated Annual Report, which reveals that some employees are being paid more than they should be, according to the city's own job evaluation system.
So someone's getting a nice little bonus at the expense of, well, everyone else.
It's just not right. Okay, let's touch on a couple of other issues. Environmental and waste management.
Right.
A councillor recently raised the issue of blocked stormwater systems. Apparently, it's a problem all over the city.
which can lead to flooding and property damage, especially during heavy rains.
And then there's the Waste Management Bylaw. What are the main goals of that?
Well, it's supposed to create a fair and reasonable system for managing waste, encourage people to be responsible, and they're really cracking down on recycling from illegal activities.
Like people stealing copper wire and then trying to recycle it.
Exactly.
Interesting. Let's talk about grants.
Oh, yeah, those are fun.
So national government gives them these grants, right? Total budget was $7.3 billion.
Of which they'd received $4.8 billion by January 2025.
Right, but there's a 56 million rand variance.
Wow.
Mainly delays with the public transport network grant.
Public transport.
Yeah, but get this, even the grants they have received, they're not fully spending them.
What?
Grant spending amounted to $4.3 billion against a year-to-date budget of $4.9 billion.
So that's money that's supposed to be going towards specific projects.
Projects that are probably vital for the city and its people.
And it's just sitting there.
Not being used.
This is unbelievable.
It's incredibly frustrating because those grants are often meant for very specific things.
Right.
So underspending there means those projects are delayed, which directly impacts people's lives.
Absolutely. So money allocated for crucial projects that just hasn't been touched.
And these aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. This is about real infrastructure projects that affect people's lives.
Roads that don't get fixed.
Water pipes that continue to leak.
Yep.
And it's all over the place when you look at specific projects.
Give me some examples.
All right, so in human settlements, you've got sewer reticulation in Winterbelt.
Which was supposed to deliver new infrastructure and improve social inclusion.
Right. There's a budget allocated, but the reports are vague on the actual outcomes or even the timeline.
And it's the same story with water provision in Mabopane X12.
Aimed at vulnerable populations, but again, no clear implementation details.
And then there's the sanitation infrastructure reticulation in Region 1 Northwest.
With a budget of a paltry 500,000 rand form. I mean, come on.
That's not going to get you very far.
No, it's not.
So why even budget for it in the first place?
It's baffling.
It's like they're just throwing darts at a board.
And the situation with roads and stormwater is no better.
Oh, yeah, let's talk about that.
Construction in Olivenhoutbosch X60 still stuck in the design phase.
Design phase.
Yeah, with a 6.3 million rand budget for this year.
So they're spending money on planning.
But nothing's being built.
Meanwhile, people are driving on these terrible roads.
Exactly. And then you've got Soshanguve X12 project, 1.69 million rand budgeted.
But it's only at the tender advertisement stage.
Tender advertisement stage.
Still not actually doing anything.
No. And Soshanguve X19 and Mabopane X1 also stuck in the design phase.
So much planning, so little action.
And then Fort West X5 construction, just straight up no in some reports.
Just no.
No explanation.
And resurfacing in Mamelodi Extension 2, Area 2, has these vague completion percentages across different quarters.
So you can't even tell how much progress they've made.
Oh.
It's a mess, and the list goes on.
Yeah, upgrading in Mabopane Block B, 4 million rand budget.
Still at the stage of appointing a consultant.
Consultant.
Upgrading in Zithobini Ward 102, no budget this year.
0.
Upgrading in Rayton, just starting with site establishment fencing.
So basically they're just putting up a fence.
That's 2.8 million rand right there.
Wow. And then contributions for roads in Montana X201, that's just paying a developer.
And Sinoville X42 project experiencing delays despite a 10.6 million rand budget.
So it's a mixed bag of slow progress and no progress.
It's a shambles, and it's the same story with water infrastructure.
Oh yeah, tell me about it.
Water reticulation in Boysen's X4 contractor procurement 1 million rand budget.
So again, still in the very early stages.
GetCB is in the works phase at least. The citywide installation of telemetry at reservoirs, that's got a 10 million rand budget.
Sounds fancy.
But are they meeting their targets? Is it actually improving water management?
Good question.
And then Klipgat wastewater treatment works upgrading was 91% complete at some point.
Supposed to be done by November 2023.
But they've pushed back the completion date again, which delays the capitalization.
Some more delays.
More delays. And then we see this again, bulk water pipeline in Boysen's X4 bulk reservoir in Fort West X4 and 5.
Both marked as no in some reports.
While the Refillaway Manor reservoir is a yes.
It's like they're playing a game of yes and no with our money.
The inconsistency is mind-boggling. It makes it incredibly difficult to track where the money is going and what people are getting for it.
And if you think water is bad, wait till you hear about electrical infrastructure.
Oh, boy.
So electricity for all projects in regions 3 and 4.
They've got these confusing statuses like close out new.
Which doesn't tell us if they actually finished the projects or if people are getting reliable power.
Upgrading existing network schemes citywide has a quarterly budget.
Okay, but are these upgrades actually reducing power outages for residents?
That's what we want to know.
Yeah, and then the IFAFI 8811 kV substation.
Vague works existing phase.
Construction of the electrical backbone network also has closeout new statuses.
So again, who knows what's going on?
And the worst part, significant underspending in key areas.
Get me with the numbers.
Only 14% of the 60 million Rand budget for HV transmission conductors was spent.
Okay.
46% of the 32 million for MV substations. 67% of the 68.1 million for distribution.
Right.
57% of the 60 million for distribution points.
Getting worse.
And a measly 44% of the 20 million for PRV stations.
That's abysmal.
Yeah, and this is essential stuff. This is what keeps the lights on.
And they're not investing in it.
It's like they're setting themselves up for failure.
And of course, they offer the usual excuses.
Tender delays, rainfall.
Consultant delays.
It's always something.
But at some point, you have to ask, are these just excuses, or is there a real lack of capacity within the municipality?
Yeah. Can they even handle these projects?
And where's the accountability?
Exactly. Who's taking responsibility for these repeated failures?
Because let's be clear, this is public money we're talking about.
So back in 2023, the Auditor General flagged them for non-compliance with the MFMA and the credit control and debt collection policy.
Big no-no.
Yeah, they demanded an investigation into potential financial misconduct by May 15th, 2023.
2023.
It's now March 2025.
And the problems are clearly still there.
So what happened to that investigation?
Good question. Did they even do it?
And if they did they actually fix anything?
This doesn't seem like.
And it gets even more bizarre. The reports themselves admit they've got reporting challenges because they're implementing a new financial system.
A new system.
Yeah. And the chief audit executive says the combination of manual data extraction with the new system data
Raises concerns about potential errors in the reports they're sending to the National Treasury.
So we can't even be sure the numbers are accurate.
That's a huge problem because without reliable data, there's no transparency.
And it makes it impossible for anyone to understand what's really going on.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces.
Exactly. And on top of that, the city manager himself reported non-compliance with deadlines for in-year financial reports in January 2025.
What was the excuse this time?
Internal committee delays, apparently.
Delays.
Yeah, disciplinary measures were supposedly taken.
Supposedly.
But this points to a breakdown in basic administrative processes.
It's amateur hour over there.
Yeah, and then there's the whole issue of deviations from the tender and quotation processes.
Ah, yes. The good old tender irregularities.
So the accounting officer approves these deviations. The council notes them.
But it's happening way too often.
Yeah, in 2023, they reported over 16.8 million Rand in deviations.
16.8 million.
And who knows how much it is now.
It's a blatant disregard for proper procurement procedures.
Which opens the door for all sorts of corruption and waste.
Exactly. And speaking of waste, let's talk about where your money is literally disappearing.
This is the fun part.
In 2021-22, their electricity distribution losses were a staggering 19.44%.
Nearly 20% of the electricity they generate and pay for is just gone.
Gone. Poof. Vanished into thin air.
And NERSA, the national regulator, says anything above 7% is unacceptable.
So they're way over the limit.
Way over. And this is due to technical issues, sure.
But also theft, illegal connections.
It's a massive drain on resources, and it directly impacts electricity prices for everyone.
And the water losses are just as bad.
Oh, yeah. In 2021-22, non-revenue water was 32.6%.
A third of the city's treated water is just disappearing.
Being stolen, who knows?
It's costing them a fortune and putting even more strain on their water supply.
And then we can't forget about that 29.5 billion Rand in consumer debt.
It's like a broken record.
I know, right? But it's such a big problem.
It is some level of outstanding payments is normal.
But this is beyond normal.
This points to serious failures in their revenue collection and enforcement.
It's money that could be used to improve services.
But it's just stuck in limbo.
And the fact that they reversed a 554 million Rand debt impairment provision
just adds to the sense that they're not in control of their finances.
And you know, when we move on to asset management concerns,
it doesn't get any better.
Nope. The reports list a bunch of projects awaiting final completion certificates, land transfers, all sorts of crucial steps.
So basically, they're not even finishing what they started.
Yeah, which means they're not benefiting from those investments.
And service delivery is likely being held back.
And we even found an impaired asset worth over 308,000 Rand, just sitting there waiting to be written off.
Another loss for the city.
And perhaps most worrying is their investment in maintaining existing infrastructure.
Right, the stuff that's already built.
Yeah, only 41.6% of their total capital expenditure is going towards renewing or upgrading existing assets.
And when you compare that to the amount of depreciation and asset impairment,
It's even worse, just 30.7%.
they're not putting enough money into maintaining the stuff they already have.
Which means it's going to deteriorate faster.
And lead to even more costly repairs down the line.
And guess who pays for that?
It's a vicious cycle.
And finally, we need to touch on their climate change and sustainability efforts. Tshwane has this ambitious climate action plan. They want to be a net zero carbon emission city by 2050.
A net zero city, that's a pretty big goal.
It is. They're talking about climate-smart spatial planning, improving air and water quality, the whole 9 yards.
It's a good vision, but can they actually achieve it, given all the financial and governance problems we've talked about?
That's the million-rand question, isn't it?
So to sum up this rather depressing deep dive, Tshwane is facing some serious challenges. Liquidity issues, wasteful spending, project delays, unreliable reporting, the list goes on and on.
And for you, the listener, this isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about your life, your city, your future.
Exactly. These issues affect every single resident of Tshwane.
And if you want to see things change, you need to understand the problems. You need to hold those in power accountable.
So as we wrap up, we want to leave you with this question. What needs to change in Tshwane? What fundamental shifts in governance and financial management are needed to get this city back on track?
We encourage you to dig deeper, read the reports we've mentioned, and then get involved. Demand better.
Because Tshwane deserves better.
And so do you. That's it for this episode of The Deep Dive.
Stay informed and stay engaged.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.